I am good. Here we go. Sunday school. Microphone. Everything has 3 syllables. All right. Good morning, all. Good morning, all. There is a handout in the back. You want the handout. A handout in the back that you want. Curtis wants it. If Curtis wants it, you want it. Oh, he has it. All right. Did anyone eat anything good over the weekend? Like food. If you ate other things too, like my daughter tried to eat plastic and paper. That wasn't good. Oh, yeah. So you had an orange, you said? Okay. Oranges are good. Anybody else? Did anyone else eat anything good, or did you all eat terrible, like dirt mixed with refried beans or something like that? Oh, brisket. All right, so Curtis ate well this week. Anybody else eat anything good this week? Or sorry, not this week. This weekend.
We went to El Vallarta.
El Vallarta.
When you get old, you can split a meal, and it's plenty for you.
Yeah.
What do you call old?
Yeah.
I just want to know.
Experience.
Middle age.
You're young at heart.
Good recovery.
Because that means so I'm old. Because Sarah and I went to on Friday. We went to La Mesa and we split a meal.
Yeah, their meals are big.
Yeah, because we got you get the it was pretty good, the fajitas. It's just the experience. You don't get that experience at home. Or if you do, you have to clean it up, and it's just really a buzzkill. But it comes out sizzling. And we got the fajitas for uno, but they have fajitas for dos. And the fajitas for uno is so much food. Hey, what are you going to do with dos? But what's really hevel about fajitas? Like the meat, it's really good right at first. And then the air starts to dry it up, and the pan overcooks it, and it just dries out. Like that really good meat that was at the beginning just kind of went.
Eat fast.
What's that?
Eat faster than normal.
What's that?
Eat faster than normal.
That's right, eat faster. But yeah, I don't know. Some people do scarf their food down. Anybody else eat anything good this weekend? One more. What'd you enjoy? Yeah.
So I made barbecue chicken wings and coleslaw.
This was a barbecue weekend, I guess. You made the coleslaw?
Oh yeah,
That's cool.
that's the only way to make it so much better.
Yeah. What kind of barbecue sauce?
I did the sweet baby Ray's.
Sweet Baby Ray's. That's a good one. All right, so you're having us all over for leftovers?
Like 4 left.
All right, we'll need a miracle, so work it out. All right, so there's a handout in the back. You want it. Curtis has it. You want it. This is annoying. Let me see. All right, welcome to Ecclesiastes, week 2. If you want a parenting class, there's one down that hallway. If you want a membership seminar, there's one right there. So we've got 3 things going on this morning. If you got little ones, there's a Sunday school class going on. There's a nursery over there. All kinds of crazy good stuff happening this morning. So before we get any further, let's pray together. Father, thank you for bringing this group of friends together to sit beneath your word, to be taught by you. We ask that you would speak to us through your word. It's not because of a man's voice that we understand the thoughts of God. It's because of the Spirit of God that we understand your thoughts. So we ask for your Spirit to move and work and teach and instruct us and then shape us to be like Jesus. Amen. Just a reminder, there's a handout in the back. You want it. Second thing before we get into the class formal today, you may have seen, you would have received you probably received an email, and if you have the Church Center app on your phone, you got a couple pings from the Ecclesiastes group. So on Church Center, overlandhills.churchcenter.com, or if you go to the App Store and you download the Church Center app, there is a little group I created called Ecclesiastes. In that group, you're there, so we can chat. You can start a chat if you want to get going on something. I'll be sending out some things, some information, maybe some videos, some things to listen to during the week, as well as reminders for homework. Also, in that group, there's a little resources tab that already has a few things in there, but I'll be adding resources, some things that I recommend. One of the resources, which, Lord willing, I will quote from today, is this fabulous commentary on Ecclesiastes, and you get a bonus, because there's Song of Songs in here too. It's by Ian Provon. It's the New International Version application commentary. So good. So good. So if you want something, it's almost devotional in nature. There's some like technical things here and there, but there's some really good stuff in this. That's a good recommendation. There's another book on there. A second thing that I failed to mention, so I'm sorry, he's not here today because he has to be at home for work, but Jeff Matthias is going to help co-teach this class, and so he'll be stepping in when he can, when his work schedule allows him. So he'll probably be interacting as well on the Church Center app. So that's that. There's a handout in the back. Last time I'll say that, probably. Here we go. Today, forget today. Let's talk about homework first. Homework. So I told you actually, but I'll say it nicely. I asked you to read Ecclesiastes 1:12 to 2:26 for your homework this week. No one has to raise hands to tell me you did your homework. But anyone who did or who wants to pretend like you did, is there any observations, any questions, thoughts from your reading this past week? Anything you want to share with the group? Yes?
A couple of times he says that he applied wisdom, so he applied it to his heart. So my observation there was that it was intentional, that he made an effort to learn it, soak it in, whatever applied meant.
Yeah, the preacher applies wisdom. Very intentional what he's doing. It's not haphazard, you know?
Then I formed a question from that as the verses went on, that when he starts to talk about how he, my word, dabbled in sinful things, did that applied wisdom give him some protection? Did it keep him from, that was my question as I read through it the first time.
Yeah, that's interesting.
How much protection did that give him?
Yeah, we'll think through that today. So as we get into the lesson today, the preacher's going to do some things in life. And it's interesting, is his intentionality in applying wisdom, did that help protect him in a way or keep him? Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
He isn't slack.
He isn't slack.
On what he said, he goes at it. Whatever he's doing, he applies himself wholly. That's
Yeah. The preacher, will find out, he's all in. Like, what he's going to do in the text today, it's not like, well, let's just try these out. It's like, we're going to try everything out full on, and we'll see why in a minute. Yeah.
Kind of what Kelly was saying about the heart. When I probably somewhere around a dozen references to applying his heart. My mind went to Jeremiah 17:9, that the heart is deceitful. And so I wonder if that indicates his use of the heart, that he's concentrating on a horizontal plane for applying that wisdom. Because in those first chapters, I don't see him applying that wisdom anything above what we experience here on earth. So I wonder if, in my mind, there's a little bit of suspicion with applying his heart only to wisdom, because where is it fallible?
Yeah. Yeah, so the question is the heart, so we're applying the heart, the text we're going to get to, but the heart is deceitfully wicked. We know that from somewhere else. Does that influence what the preacher is doing here in his exploration of things? It's interesting. There's a great translation by this scholar John Goldingay. He just did it's like a single translator translation, so he translated the whole Old Testament. Talk about a task. Whew. He says in his translation, those phrases where I like said in my heart, or I applied my heart, he translates it, I said to myself inside myself. I said to myself inside myself. I think that's the way he translates it. Because because when heart is like your person, that's like who you are inside, like where your will, your intentions, your affections, all those things are like there inside of you, and he's like talking to himself, inside myself, what should you do? We do that all the time, right? And we think we're crazy sometimes for it. We think other people are crazy because they don't think the way we do. They don't talk to themselves the way we do, all that kind of stuff. A couple more comments on homework? Yeah.
I agree about the hints of wisdom. I think chapter 2 is a growing process of man-centered views of joy. And it leads to pride, which is capitalized in verse 26, even in the chapter, where he gives some light to the Almighty. But he clearly says, but to the sinners given the business of gathering and collecting, what he gives to the one who pleases God. And that this again is just man describing the word all along through there. And it's been said enough times. He doesn't see at this point, at least we don't know the end of the book, he doesn't seem to see at this point the value. Because it's all man-centered views.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to see that a lot of what's going on is very much just through the eyes of a man on earth, thinking like mankind thinks, and you miss something in that. Like there's blinders. There's like, you can't get it all, even interestingly enough, if you apply wisdom. All right, well, let's dig into the lesson. Thank you for doing homework. We're going to talk about our homework every week just a little bit, just to keep our thoughts brewing and trying to think out loud about what is happening in Ecclesiastes. Because Ecclesiastes isn't a one-read book. Read it, got it, cool. Next, most books in the Bible aren't that way because you're supposed to go back and see things new, like see how things connect, see how one story relates to another story. Ecclesiastes is weird because it's kind of like an everlasting gobstopper. You put it in your mouth and you just keep chewing it and chewing it and chewing it. And eventually, like once you go insane, like you pass the point of insanity, then you start to grasp some parts of it, like what's going on, what's the flavor, all that. So I invite you to go insane. Read Ecclesiastes a lot, and we'll try to think out loud about that. Last week, the lesson was called Introducing Life, and right here, I held all of life in my hands, from Adam to the last man until Jesus comes back, and then we're somewhere in here, and we looked at how we're on this cosmic merry-go-round, as one commentator says. That we're, right here, mankind, humanity, is in pursuit of gain, of surplus, of achievement, of trying to get something that's meaning in life, something new. But the problem is we get on this cycle of we're born, we strive for things, and then we die, don't really ever get them, and then the next generation comes and thinks, we'll do it, we'll master it. We created the iPhone, we've really progressed, right? Like we've really advanced beyond former generations. And I know that everybody's, some people are really into the news. I'm not really into it, so I'm not going to get into it. But this week, I know the news has been a little crazier than normal, but the real question is, has it been crazier than normal? Or has it just always been nuts, right? That's an interesting question to ask. See, we're saying, look, something new this week. And God's just kind of standing there looking at the world you should read some, the first couple pages of the Bible. You kind of have a grasp on mankind's out of their mind. They don't get things. They pursue things by folly, but they think they're being wise. So we're stuck on this, and there's the illusion of change in life, but truly all that has been is what will be. All that has been done is what will be done. And so last week we talked that life is fleeting, or it's hevel, that Hebrew word. That means, again, fleeting or maybe elusive, like you can't catch it or can't understand it, but maybe also elusive, like with an I, kind of like outside. It's really fitting that it's misty today. Oh, what an Ecclesiastes type of day. Where it's misty, it's like an illusion, or you can't really see clearly, you can't grasp it. That's the essence of hevel. And so as we look at this, we're like, there's got to be meaning, there's got to be some purpose to life. What is going on? And the book says life's hevel. You can't grasp it completely. So this week, that was introducing life, and that was somewhat of a downer, troublesome, wearisome. This week we're talking about the good life. So hopefully we find some good. There'll be two meanings as we talk about what the good life is. And the preacher, has been already talked about, that's the main character or the main wise teacher in the book, is going from this, he's got the whole world in his hands, from Adam to the last guy, to like a single point in that big picture of life, of just ground level, one man's life. He's the king, which means he's like the man at the top of the world, king of the hill. What's this guy's life like in the midst of this? Can this guy, the preacher, the king, achieve some kind of gain in life? Can he find his goal? He's the king. He's got everything at his hands. And so, as you see on the handout, our text I've organized in 4 sections, and I think this is essentially what the writer of Ecclesiastes is trying to get us to see, is the preacher is going to make observations about the world around him. He's going to use wisdom to observe things. Then he's going to dive into it experientially, trying to figure out life. How do I get the good life? There's going to be some realizations along the way about the good life, and then finally resolution at the end to his struggle to find that. So we're going to begin in Ecclesiastes 1:12 to 18. This is on your handout, that observation section. So let's read some Ecclesiastes. Here we go. I'll be reading and reflecting as we go. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. So again, we got to think king, like high-ranking, wealth, success. In God's terms, he's supposed to know the law well. He's supposed to be wise well. Kind of a Solomon-like figure. So he's got it all. That's the high up. We should have that perspective. Here's what he goes on to say. He says, I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom. That's the Hebrew word chokmah. Say chokmah. Chokmah. That's right. Fun word. Search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. So this is what we're talking about. So he's looked at all of the universe, all of life, but now he's just in a particular life. What's going on? What does mankind do under heaven, meaning under the sun? Just all their days on earth, what is it that mankind does under heaven? I'm applying wisdom, so I'm thinking carefully about it. I'm not being, again, haphazard about that. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. So that's another one. Here's another Hebrew word. Can you say ra? Good job. That one's a little easier. So ra, it's interesting. So he says, what's happening under heaven? He already tells us what he thinks about it up front. He says what he sees, what he's observed by wisdom, is that God has given mankind, so all of us together, an unhappy, a raw business, raw work. Raw is a word that's translated in multiple ways in the Old Testament. Bad or evil, unhappy, lacking in delight and pleasure. So it's a broad term. So it's just meaning the bad business. It's rough life for us man on earth in our pursuits. So he says, I've applied to seek this out. It's bad business that we've been given to do. It's unhappy. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is hevel and a striving after wind. Remember, hevel, maybe smoke. We'll talk about hevel a little bit more today. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. So, searched out all of life. He says all of it, everything done under the sun is hevel, and a new term, striving after wind. What does this little parable or riddle maybe mean? Anybody want to take a stab at this? What does this phrase mean? What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. What do you think he means by that? Want to take a stab? Yeah.
I think it means can't be perfect in heaven. I work with some metal here and there at times, and I come across where
That's interesting, yeah. Like when things get out of whack in life, like some metal or any like materials, you can't get it back to like pristine new, right? You can cover it up, you can make it look pretty close, but it's never going to be what it was before. And what the preacher's saying is, as he looks at all of the things that mankind does under the earth, under the sun, he's saying that the things in life that are kind of crooked, kind of out of whack, they're not working right, you know? You can't fix those things. You don't have the power to straighten them out. Even if you do, if you think you do, like maybe all the ways we try to like make ourselves stay young for like as many, appear young, deep down inside, you're growing old and you're going to die. Like, you can't straighten that out. All other aspects of life, same thing, what is lacking cannot be counted. If you don't have something, you can't count it. So he's saying the things that are missing in life, you can't say, well, look, I found them, here they are. No, if something's just not in place in life, if there's a hole in life, a gap in your understanding, in your experience of life, he's saying you can't fill that in. It's just, that's life. Welcome to a hevel, striving after wind life. He goes on, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So the preacher goes on to say, I have made a full, objective search. That's why he can say things like, all is hevel, all is smoke, or everything man does under the sun is like striving after wind. Because he's made this full objective search. He's looked at what's it like to live wise in life. What's wisdom do for you? Can wisdom achieve anything in your life? Can you end up at what you're aimed at with wisdom? But maybe being crazy, just being mad with your life. We know plenty of people like this. You might watch the news and you see a lot of crazy people. And you think, well, sometimes maybe they're doing better. Maybe they've got life figured out. Or maybe just being an ignorant, simple-minded fool is a better way to live this life. And you've got life figured out. And that's the good life under the sun. And he said, I searched it all out. And all of it I don't understand. I don't get it. It's all hevel. It's all striving after wind. Everybody in their experience, whether wise, mad, or a fool, is still striving after wind, trying to get the good life figured out. He says at the end, this other little like riddle or parable, in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. I don't think he's denigrating wisdom, but he's saying the more I understand, the harder it is to understand. I think about sometimes, at different points in your life, you want to be older or younger. I think I'm still a little bit in the phase of like, I want to be older, but every once in a while I want to just go back and probably be like at least 16 so I can drive. But I want to be young. I don't want responsibility. I don't want even understanding. I think about my kids. So this week, I remember we went out to sushi with some friends, and on CNN, they're at Blue Sushi downtown, CNN has these big screens up with the Capitol being charged and, people storming in there and all that craziness this week. And I don't even care that much, but the way it's being portrayed and everything, it's like, I need to pay attention to that. And then I just get bothered by it because I don't care, but now I feel like I'm supposed to care. And it's like the more I understand the world, the more I think I'm supposed to care about things, that I know somebody's going to text me and say, you need to care about this, and they're going to tell me both ways I need, all that stuff. The more I understand things in life, the harder it gets. That's just one. Then you get to why do, you grow up and you watch people around you die or suffer, and you start to understand life a little bit more, and you get to understand that, just like we said before, what's lacking cannot be counted. Their suffering might not go away. And the more you understand that suffering, the less you understand it really. It just kind of is a thing in life. But when you're a kid, you just kind of live. Like, it's just the beauty of that, like, blissful ignorance or innocence of a child. They don't suffer what the preacher suffered in his search of trying to understand the good life. But is wisdom bad? We'll find out. So, the good life, as he pursues understanding of it, there is a sense, because mankind is busily pursuing it, that humanity wants it. But the preacher seems to come to this conclusion, or at least working toward it, that it's very hard to figure out what is going on under the sun. What is mankind doing with his life under the sun? Second, he moves on to some experimentation in life. This is now Ecclesiastes 2, 1 to 11, if you're following in a print Bible. On your handout, it's halfway down the front. So the preacher now dives into life and going to try to experience it and see if he can maybe find or even create the good life under the sun. He says, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. So there's another word. Say tov. Say tov. Yeah, so that's the Hebrew word for good or delight or pleasure. So he's saying, have good for yourself. So the preacher says, go test yourself with pleasure, enjoy yourself. But, behold, this also was hevel. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? So wisdom, trying to figure out life. Oh, I was supposed to draw this up here. Sorry. Wisdom. How about that for a light bulb? I am not an artist. My wife needs to be here. That's a light bulb for wisdom. So he's trying to figure out wisdom, trying to figure out the good life by wisdom. Maybe if I understand wisdom, I can get to what I want. He can't. Second, he tries out pleasure. And he says that was hevel as well. That was just kind of smoke, like a mist. But he goes on and tells us, what did he do to try to experience pleasure and make good for himself, to have a tov life? What's he do? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. The world tries to do that a lot. But he says, my heart's still guiding me with wisdom, meaning he's like, I'm going to try the wine thing, the pleasure thing, but my mind is still engaged. I'm keeping with it. I'm sticking along on my search. I'm not just going to become like a mindless drunk. How to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven the few days of their life. So here's everything that the preacher did to try to find the good life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasures of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was the reward, my reward for all my toil. So, the preacher creates his own little paradise. I'm using a tree for paradise. He talks about the trees he planted. Creates his own little paradise. Gets everything, anything that we think mankind would want, right? So he gets food, drink, property, workers, treasure, music, sex, like everything that we think, if I had all that, that's the good life, right? Like, I got it. He's got everything. He's exhausted it. Anything he wants, because he had access to it, he gets. He must have found the good life, right? Maybe wisdom didn't do it, but maybe making your own paradise, if I can just gather it all in, maybe he'll get the good life. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was hevel, and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So the preacher, after creating his own paradise, he made a very valiant attempt to find the good life. He comes to the conclusion he did of wisdom, of all of life, and he says, it was hevel, it was like smoke. I had it all, and yet like I couldn't grasp it. Just kind of like went away like a breath, just faded. And he says all of what I was doing, in all of that toil, him expending his energy to create paradise for himself, was a striving after wind. He was trying to chase the wind. He's never going to catch it. He concludes, essentially answering the question he asked in I think, verse 3 of chapter 1. What can man gain by all his toil under the sun? He says, nothing. Can't gain anything. He had all the world, and he didn't gain anything. I think about like my iPhone. Where's my iPhone? iPhones are always good illustrations. Usually in the negative, but like this iPhone. So for the past, 4 or 5 years, I've bought used phones because like I can get phones for like $50 or $100, and they work great. But I thought, so this new iPhone came out. It was a cheaper version, but it was still new. And I'm like, it's probably time because my battery was dead. Welcome to smartphones. Bought the new iPhone, and there's like always this sense, I'm a fool. I know I'm a fool. You all can say I'm just young, foolish. This is I'm like, once I get this iPhone, once I get the new one, I'll be good, right? I won't need any more iPhones. Be all good. And then what's crazy is I don't really care about this, but it's annoying. This iPhone, which is brand new, a newer version, which you would think they improved, the screen scratches so much more than the last one. And the battery, after like 6 months, is just as lousy as the used one I paid $50 for. Like, what's up with that? I had very hevel thoughts toward this, thinking like, aha, I have achieved iPhone domination. And yet, it just slipped through my fingers. I think it's going to be like, again, look, something new, something we've achieved. It didn't matter. It just faded off. There's a crash, right? Like you get something new, you get that new present at Christmas time, and maybe it satisfies for a little bit, but eventually there's a crash if you were putting too much hope in it, if you thought it was going to give you the good life. So, I want you to notice something about the good life, how we can't create it. Notice in this text, maybe even including the upper section of the text, the wisdom part, notice the similarities to Genesis 3. What happens in Genesis 3, right at the beginning? Just general theme. What happens in Genesis 3? Somebody knows. What's that? Sin? Yes, sin, right? So the Eve, the serpent in the garden thing, right? Notice the similarities. I think that this is intentional in Ecclesiastes. So, first, in the garden, there's paradise to be had, to enjoy. And it's just yours to freely take. And it's not hevel at that time. It's because it's been given to you. You didn't try to create it. In the garden, there is one thing that's off limits, though. What is it? Somebody say it a little louder because that was a lot of...
Tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah, the tree of the knowledge of Tov and Ra, of good and bad, good and evil. That's what's in the garden. One thing you can't go and take for yourself, he says. God says to Eve. And yet, we find mankind, represented by Adam and Eve, as wanting more. There's one thing I don't have. And they're tempted, and they think that they can gain something from this. So in Genesis 3:6, the woman saw the tree. It was good for food. It was a delight to the eyes. The tree was to be desired to make one wise. Isn't that interesting? Do you know that the fall of man is described as the pursuit of wisdom? It's not described as just like trespass. God said something, you did it wrong. Like that's sin. No, in the fall of mankind, in Adam and Eve, it's described as she saw something, so like lust, like, oh, that looks really good. That tree, whew, that's going to taste good. That's going to be delightful. And it's going to make me wise. It's going to give me insight. I'm going to understand things better than I understand right now. See how the preacher's trying to do the same thing? By wisdom, I'm trying to understand the world, and he hits this wall. He's trying to find something pleasurable, and he hits this wall, and he says it's hevel. Eve does the same thing. She took of its fruit and ate, and she gave some to her husband who was with her. So she took it, right? She took what she wasn't supposed to have. Everything else was given to her as a gift. There was one thing she wanted, and I think she thought, maybe there's some gain in that. Like, I'm missing out on something, right? That's what the tempter does, right? The snake comes up and says, there's one more thing out there, but God's holding it back from you. And in light of that taking, trying to get a little bit more of the good life, there's a big letdown, a frustration of mankind. Genesis 3, 7, and 8. The eyes of both of them were opened. They knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths, hid themselves from the presence of the Lord. So very much like the preacher in Ecclesiastes, Adam and Eve had it all, and they just couldn't enjoy it because they wanted a little bit more. They wanted a little bit of gain, and then when they went after it, thought that it would be a means of gain, it actually turned out to be loss and frustration, separation. They were ashamed of one another. They noticed, if you think about it, why is it that they cover themselves up with loincloths? They noticed their differences. So there was this separation between husband and wife. Then they hid from God, separation. So all the bliss, the unity, the enjoyment was ruined. So the preacher, in trying to make his own paradise, finds a very similar thing. Life is hevel. He couldn't get it. He had it all, but there was no gain, was there? So he moves on in verses 12 to 23 and comes to some realizations through this as he thinks through his work, what he was toiling for. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. So if you've probably noticed, I have a bunch of things underlined on your paper. That's all the toil, the work that man exerts to try to find the good life, find some tov in this world. The preacher says, I was the king of the world. I had it all. What can anyone else do after me? I've already tried everything. There's nothing else you can try to find this good life. What can man do that's not already been done? But then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Ooh, maybe wisdom is gain, right? Maybe there is gain under the heavens if we have wisdom. And yet, I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is hevel. Wisdom's kind of, this is like hevel meaning almost deception. Like it's very deceptive. You think, wisdom's going to be it. That's it. It's just smokiness. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will be long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I know if you were here last week, you're wondering where this is. So here's our tombstone, and written on it, I'm sure this is what you're going to write on yours too, is hevel, right? So, I'm supposed to draw this up here. I forget what I drew for work. What's a good picture for work? A shovel? This is not going to be a good shovel. You shouldn't have told me to do that. Okay, that's kind of a shovel. That represents work. I'll just write that there. Work and toil. Maybe toil, maybe wisdom, maybe paradise will do it for me. Maybe I'll get the good life. Maybe I'll understand what mankind should do with his life under the sun. But we all die. Why was I so wise? Why did I prosper so much? Why did I work so hard? Everyone's going to die. And even if you think you're going to leave a legacy, everything's going to be forgotten, right? Like I asked last week, very few of us know what our great-grandparents did. And nowadays, no offense, like to people who are really into this, anything you read on the internet about what your great-grandparents did, I would doubt that too. And if anything, we know history is very whitewashed, you know? Like it's like always made to look better in somebody's interest. So it's like you don't know, like what happened before you. It's all lost. The wise dies like the fool. Now here's where it gets really taxing. This is why I think some people translate hevel as meaningless or vanity. So I hated life because what is done under the sun was grievous. It was raw. It was bad to me. Unhappy. For all is hevel and a striving after wind. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will be master of all which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is hevel. So I turned about and gave up my heart to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is hevel and a great evil, very bad. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart which he toils beneath the sun? What do you have? Like, what are you going to, you don't have anything. There's no gain, no keep. For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is hevel. Right? The people who work the hardest in life typically are the ones who don't rest the best in life. And that's hevel. They missed out on at least some rest. They just exerted all this energy for something that they don't get to because there's a grave right there. All is hevel. Death is the ultimate reason for everything being hevel, like a breath or misty smokiness. Death is what ruins it for us, friends. Think about the connections back to Genesis 3 really quick. Remember, pursuit of wisdom, all this wisdom. But it's because of humanity's pursuit for more. They want to get God status, right? They want to be like God. God has the knowledge of good and evil. You better believe it. They want it, though. Because of that pursuit for more, death, what's really the preacher's struggling with, what ruins it, what ruins our pursuit for more is death. Death came into the world because we wanted more. The way that death is described in Genesis 3, everybody else struggle with, like, God said, the day you eat of it, you shall surely die of the fruit. And you're like, Eve took the bite. Why isn't she dead on the floor? Why did Adam even have a chance to eat it? She should be dead. But the way death is described, again, is separation. But maybe some of this hevel frustration is in there too. Related to the preacher, death is described as away from the good life, away from rest in the garden with God. The curse brings pain, frustration, and conflict for the woman. Pain in childbirth, conflict in marriage. It brings difficulty, burdensome work, and a return to the dust. Right? The way the curse is described for man, the fall, what is death for the man? That he's going to work his tail off in life, and all the time the ground's going to be working against him. It's not going to achieve what he wants, because he can't, because the world's just kind of fighting against him. What's crooked cannot be made straight. What's lacking cannot be counted. There's this restlessness. Hevel rides the line of overwhelming sorrow. The smokiness of life is right on the verge of meaninglessness. Like, what's the point of doing anything under the sun? We're all going to die. No remembrance. I want to read you something from Ian Provan in here. because it's brilliant. So he says, faced with life set within the confines that God has ordained, even though this may involve living in a paradise where joy abounds and where wisdom can be sought in dependence on God. So he's talking about Genesis 3. Now listen to this. From the very beginning, human beings have chosen to transgress the boundaries, so the boundaries that God has set, in search of something more. From the very beginning, human beings, like the boundary is, God says, I'm putting you in a very safe and blissful and blessed paradise. There are other things, because he's God. We're not God. We're just images. And we want more. Like, what's just one more, just a little more. In search of something more, we turn the life that comes to us as a gift to be enjoyed, we turn our lives into capital that might fund exploitation and expansion. The preacher in Ecclesiastes is only one biblical voice that seeks to persuade us that the more does not exist. Oh man, that hits me. I am such, more. This is going to be it. I got more finally, right? We're always after more, more, more. The more does not exist. There is no more under the sun. It's just what is. So, what about the good life? According to the preacher, death spoils life. It ruins it. Under the sun, death spoils life. Death and the futility of things is the reason why gain is impossible. There is no more. But here's the secret. We'll get a little glimpse of this today. The real message of Ecclesiastes is that if you can come to terms with this, if you can accept this, if you come to terms with life is a smoky, heavy, misty, elusive thing, you're on your way to finding the good life. You got to start there, though, acceptance of your problem, step one. So he goes on to resolution. Notice all the uses of good. They're all highlighted in green. Resolution. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting only to give to the one who pleases God. This also is hevel and a striving after wind. So there's all this good. The preacher, what he says, the way the construction of the sentence is it actually starts with, good is this, which is better than that, what I was just talking about. So everything that preceded this, all his pursuits, he's saying, I have a better idea, a more good idea of how to live. I've come to some conclusions. It's better, it's good that a person should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. Now, you might be scratching your head saying, dude, didn't you just try that 20 verses ago with the whole pleasure thing and building paradise for yourself? And he's saying something just a little different here. He's saying that the good life is not here. Good life under the sun is not here, trying to get something. The good life is right here. Today, this moment right here, the preacher is saying, God is giving you the good life. He's saying, where pleasure is found, where good is found in your life, is not in the paycheck that you're getting at the end of the week, 2 weeks later, but on Monday when you're at work, God's given you something to do. He's given you something good for your life. And the idea is to find pleasure in the good thing you have. Because what you have today is what you have. You cannot secure anything tomorrow. Your paycheck might not come. And then you're going to be disappointed. Now I don't have the good life. But God has given you things today to be enjoyed, today to be cherished, today that is good for you. God doesn't only give unhappy business to mankind under the curse, but to some, to those who are pleasing or good in God's sight, God gives enjoyment and wisdom. But it's just in today, it's in the present, in the things we have right here. He also, though, as it says at the end, kind of like what he was reflecting on earlier, he's given some sinners, so now there's like morality on the line, those who please God and those who don't please God. Sinners have the busy business of striving after wind, of a heavy life, and they just bless those who are good because they're after more. They're after more. The one who pleases God is the one who recognizes that they cannot grab the good life like a tree of knowledge of good and evil, but rather it's given to them. The good life is a gift. The failure in Eden, thinking back to Genesis 3, was that Adam and Eve did not enjoy the gift of God. They did not receive it. The entire garden, think about it, like the whole thing was a blessing. This goes back to good and bad. I'm really intentionally using the good life, tov. How many times, I don't know, I should have counted, is good used in those first 3 chapters of Genesis? God makes this creation, and it's all good, 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 good. It's good for humans. That's what he's making it for. The trees are good for humans. The sun's good for humans. The animals are good for humans to rule over. And then he does like one up right at the end, like, there's something not good. Man's all on his own. And then he gives her a wife, a partner in life. So good. All this blessing just to be enjoyed. God says, go have it all. Eat all the trees except that one. And then right after that, they're like, but isn't there more? Isn't there more? God says, no, it's right here. Here's the gift. Enjoy your life. Enjoy my blessings. So a commentary, brilliant commentary on Genesis, well, actually the Pentateuch says this about the garden. Human happiness does not consist in being like God, but rather being with God, enjoying the blessing of his presence. God is your father. He is not a peer. Think about that. God's your father who gives you things. Taking that tree, trying to gain more, trying to be more than just who you are in your mortal self, is treating God like a peer. We can be buds, right? Like, we can be on the same plane. It's like, no, your father who gives good gifts. What is the good life under the sun? It's when God gives us good things today. It's seeing the blessing of God today. And generally, this happens in the small stuff. Here's something else from Ian Provon. When the preacher acknowledges that he found joy in his work, so back in when he's doing the pleasure trip right here, trying to build a life for him. When he found joy in it, he said, I found some joy there. Like, it was kind of nice when I had the paradise. But then right afterward, he says it's hevel. He says he realizes quickly that he was unable to gain. He deliberately missed the point in the interest of describing what is truly, if insanely, a common view of the purpose of life. People think the purpose of life is gain. We'll gain it somehow. Listen to this line. There is no surplus to joy beyond joy itself. There's no surplus to joy beyond joy itself. There is indeed no pathway to joy except by refusing to pursue it and grasp at it. The preacher's fault is he thinks, I'm going to seek pleasure, I'm going to seek joy, I'm going to seek the high life. And when he finally gets stuff, he finally gets things that are pleasing. Some food, music, sex, wealth. It's like, no, there's still something beyond that. His fault was he thinks there's something beyond joy. Joy itself is the goal, and it's a gift. That's what the preacher's saying here is, the things that God gives you today, you ought to enjoy. That is what it means to fear the Lord, because you accept what he gives. You trust him. You don't think, why didn't you give me more? Why didn't you do this? What's wrong with that? You didn't do it right. You accept the hevel of life. Mankind brought sin into this world. Things don't always go the way they ought to go, or the way I think they ought to go, but you trust God in today
for what he provides. It's a recognition that you don't control the world, especially your own life. Fearing the Lord, receiving the good life, is coming to terms with the hevel of everything. It's a trusting in him, not your own understanding. The trust is not looking out into the distance for gain and achievement, but rather cherishing his present blessings and happily yielding to his control that transcends the hevel of the universe. So God doesn't deal with life in hevel terms. Life is not smoky to God at all. You better believe that. But to us, it always will be. Your life before you were a Christian and your life as a Christian is smoky, misty. You're still in a world that's crooked. But within that, God is reigning. And if you're the one now who's been made good in God's sight, he gives things. You can see those things. You can receive them as what they are. Your marriage is a blessing. Enjoy it for what it is. If it's rough, that's what God's given you. See if you can work it out. Enjoy the blessings that are there. Don't always be saying, well, if she only did this, if he only did this, if she only did. See the search for more we have in life? Like I think about when we went out to sushi the other day. Sorry, I complained afterward. Because I went to this other sushi place earlier in the week. I had a lot of sushi. I had a lot of raw fish this week. But I went to this other place earlier in the week to celebrate Mark Hansen moving away to Wichita. And we went to this like really fancy sushi place. And it's like the best, top 3 meals I've ever had in my life. And we had not a hevel time. We enjoyed what God gave us. It was awesome. Great company, great experience, all that. Then we went to another place and had sushi later in the week. And it just wasn't the same quality. And instead of just being there with my friends, enjoying the moment, enjoying the food as what it is, I sat there like, well, it's not what I had earlier this week. I want more. Why didn't we go? You can't recreate those things. What you have at the moment is the gift that God has given you. Receive it for what it is. Accepting the hevel of life is the secret to the good life. Now, final comments. Is there any lasting meaning, transcendence beyond the grave? Is there anything beyond this? Or is it just accept this and then we die and at least we accepted it, right? This isn't eat, drink, and be merry for tomorrow we die. This is eat, drink, and be merry because that's what God gave you. That's what God's blessed you with. It's a very different statement. Christ is what gives meaning, achievement beyond the grave. Christ is the answer to the hevel of life, the smokiness of life. He is the source and the completion of the hope of Ecclesiastes. Because there is a good life. There is gain, friends. Like there is true gain in life. The grave does not render life meaningless. There is good. It's really fitting again. There is good beyond the mist of life under the sun. But it's not yours to take. It's not yours to find. It's not yours to achieve. It's yours to receive. Meaning in life, gain in life is Christ. Christ is the answer to the hevel of life. He is the reward beyond the mist, but he's also the present blessing right now in the present. And, because the question could be asked, should we work at all? Should we toil? Should we try to do anything in life? Or should we, again, eat, drink, be merry for tomorrow we die? Just kind of become, pleasure seekers in life, get as much as we can out of this life. No, Christ is our labor. Our only labor ought to be the labor of Christ, in Christ, for Christ. Because the labor of Christ isn't like this stuff. The labor of Christ goes beyond. I want to share with you one passage, and we'll talk more about Jesus as we go, because I know it kind of gets heavy at times. One passage from Colossians 1, 28 and 29, to just remind you, you ought to work really hard. You should sweat in this world, laboring, but only for Christ. Everything else, receive it. And when it gets frustrating, recognize that life's hevel. Here's what you should labor for. You should labor that everyone grows mature in Christ. Colossians 1, 28 and 29. Paul says, Christ we proclaim, warning everyone and teaching everyone with all wisdom, that we may present everyone mature in Christ. For this I toil, struggling. So Paul's saying, I struggle my life is a struggle, a toil, because you're fighting a heavy world in this. I'm struggling to present everyone mature in Christ, that people know him, love him, cherish him. He says, I struggle with all his energy that he powerfully works within me. So friends, even in this life, your toil, if you accept Hevel, is not your toil. Paul says it's Christ's toil in you. It's the energy of Christ working in you to bring about the goal, which is Christ, which is gain. We gain the good life because Christ has gained us. He's gained us. And so that gain that we get is a gift. For Christ, last comment, for Christ, gain for him, the good life, is achievement and a prize. Christ won. He gained something in his life, death, and resurrection. For us, though, everything is an inheritance and a gift that we share in Christ. That's all we got time for. We'll talk more next week. Good stuff. Thank you all.